Well, good afternoon. When I was in high school and my early years in college, I had a friend that I attended school with. And in a conversation with him, he was he was planning some event and said, why don't you come along and join us? And it was on a Wednesday evening. And I said, no, I won't be able to. I'm going to be heading to Bible study. And he then proceeded to decide he was going to try to convince me of the error of my ways and to ask me through a series of questions why I wasn't going to go along with them. And of course, they had seen this pattern before. I went to worship services on Sunday and went to Bible class on Wednesday, and this was my pattern. And I think they were trying to test me a little bit. At least he was. And he said, why do you go? And so it turned into a religious discussion of sorts. And then he asked me, he's like, well, if you miss one service, are you going to go to hell? Is that what's going to happen? And so we talked a little bit about how God expects us and how He expects us to behave and why we do the things that we do. And that I wanted to go to Bible study because I wanted to learn more in those things. And then he proceeded to ask me about heaven. And so I began to tell him a few things about heaven as we were describing. He's like, what's it like? And these things, and what are you going to do there? And as I described to him, and I think Daniel in his lesson, he had a quote from an individual, and I don't recall what the fellow's name was he said was talking about this big eternal song service in the sky. But as I was discussing this with my friend and was telling him about that we get to be in the very presence of God for all eternity, and that we're there and we get to serve Him and to worship Him, and was going through some of these things, he interrupted me. And I remember he said to me, and it startled me when he said, that would be hell for me. And I thought, man. And I said, really? And he said, oh yeah, that's not what I want. And then he kind of told me a little bit about what he would envision heaven would be like for him. And that description was much more of a physical nature, and we didn't spend a bunch of time talking. I wasn't interested in his delusions. But but it did tell me how people look at heaven or look at their reward. So today, for this lesson, we're going to be looking at Islam's view of heaven and look at what, and there are several different nuanced views of Islam's view of heaven, and look at some of the description about what heaven, or Jannah, as Islam refers to heaven as, or paradise, and look at the entrance requirements and a little bit of a comparison. And what I want to be fair in my representation of what Jannah is. I think it's very easy for us to take and to cherry pick the very worst text that we could possibly find and try to misconstrue something about another religion. If you ask somebody who was not a Christian and said, what is heaven like? And they immediately went to the Apocrypha to pull something out, we'd go, well, wait a minute, hold on now. Or they went to the Watchtower, perhaps because they went, no. And then, or they went over to the Book of Mormon and were walking us through, no. And so the way that we're going to go about this is we're going to look at Islam from Islam's primary text, and that's the Quran. Now there are, interestingly enough, it's not like what we would think where we just have the Bible only. They have the Quran, but they also have these things called hadiths. And so we'll talk about some of those here in just a minute. But when we look at heaven, or Jannah, from Islam's perspective, the word there that they refer to heaven is paradise. And in fact, the Greek word that we have, paradisio, that word there comes from the Persian word paradisia, which is a walled garden. That's what that word. So that word worked its way into the Greek language from hundreds of years before Christ. It worked its way into the language, and they adopted that word. So when we say the word paradise, it really comes from the Persian word paradisia, which is that walled garden, that picture. And so that's how we would describe a park or a walled garden, something along those lines. And so keep that in mind as we go through. So Muhammad founded Islam in about 610 AD. And it was there on the Arabian Peninsula, basically where modern-day Saudi Arabia is. He was in Mecca. And so you can picture that area in the Near East or the Middle East, depending on how you want to refer to it. And interestingly enough, if you're not aware, inside of the Quran, there are references to the Torah for the Jews and references to the gospel for Christians, which is interesting that they show some recognition of those texts. And but Islam views Muhammad as the main and final of God's prophets. So this is the reverence that they hold him with and where he is at. And so the central text, as I mentioned, is the Quran. And that Quran is the most important amongst any and all of the denominations of Islam. So that's where they start the basis of their foundational belief. And then after that, that is considered the faultless word of Allah. And it was delivered to the Prophet Muhammad by an angel named Gabriel. Now, second to that, they also have hadiths and sunnahs. And so hadiths we'll talk a little bit about. And these are writings about these are collections of stories about the Prophet Muhammad. And it was like the longest. You remember the game that you might have played as a child, the telephone game, where I whisper something in Brian's ear and he whispers it in Jaji's ear, and it works its way all the way down. And by the time it gets to the back of the room, we have an entirely different statement. I mean, it might not have any recollection. Well, so with the way that Islam would pass along these things, it was an oral tradition. And so it's passed, and you would say, I heard this from, so not only would you tell the story, but you would tell who you heard it from. I heard it from Chad, Brian would say. And then Brian would tell Jaji, that's what he would say. Then Jaji would say, I heard it from Brian, who heard it from Chad. And then Ben would say, I heard it from Jaji, who heard it from Brian, who heard it from Chad. So they would have this catalog of who they heard these things through. And so with these hadiths, these were long after Muhammad had passed, they would write these down. And this is the source of Sharia law. They would combine the Quran along with the writings in these hadiths, and this is what would make up how you should behave as a Muslim, what you should believe about the religion and how you should comport yourself. And so, but it's secondary in authority to the Quran. Now, there are three different types, and I'm getting in the weeds a little bit, but I want us to understand the complexity of the situation. So amongst these hadiths, these secondary writings about what Muhammad lived and his life and sayings, there are categorization there. And I mean, I was driving down a wormhole looking at this type of category. So they have them categorized into three main groups. They have one, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Sahih, which is the continuous chain of transmission. And they view them as reliably authentic. So when you have this is almost as good as the Quran. This is as good as the word of Allah. And then the second one is Hasan, which is well established. There's lots of supporting evidence, but not quite that same chain. And the third category is Da'if, which is weak or unreliable. And so it's either the narrator has a questionable character or questionable memory. Now, amongst those, there's other subcategories. And amongst these writings, it depends on which denomination inside of Islam that you belong to, which of these hadiths that you ascribe to. And so there are all kinds of, and so when you say, what does Islam believe about heaven, is like saying, what does Christendom believe on the topic of, and fill in the blank. So we have to be cautious not to try to group them all together, but instead let us look more along the lines of what does the Quran say about Jannah or their paradise or their garden or their heaven. And so I am going to spend almost the entire time in the Quran as we go through this, not looking at hadiths, because I did not want to cherry pick, because some of them, I will tell you, I could not repeat some of the things that I read in some of these hadiths in mixed company. The graphic nature of some of these descriptions that are used are such that we really could not go through them here in a proper way. And so we're going to focus on the Quran, and we're going to leave the hadith and those various different hadiths to the Islamic scholars and those various different denominational sects. So when we look at the entrance requirements to Jannah, so heaven in Islam is Jannah, and so there are some requirements. What must you do in order to be saved as a Muslim? And so from what I understand here is belief in Allah and Muhammad as his prophet is a requirement. You cannot get to Jannah if this isn't something that you believe. Second is you really need to ascribe to the 5 pillars of Islam. Now, one of these pillars is really difficult for you to do, and not everybody is able to do it. And as we go through this, you look at the first one is, and my pronunciation's terrible, that's why I have them written. Oh, it's not even showing up there. Well, all right. While he's working on this, we'll continue on with my notes here. So the first requirement is belief in Allah and as the one and only true God. And second is belief that Muhammad is his prophet. Then there also needs to be adherence to the 5 pillars of Islam. So these 5 main pillars of Islam, the first one is Shahada, which is a profession of faith. And so not something that would be foreign to us as a thought of a profession of faith. The second one is Salah, and this is their prayers. And they're instructed that they're to pray while facing towards Mecca 5 times a day. That's what they're to do. And you are expected to do this, and this is your requirement. And if you're unable to do that, you're prevented from doing it, it doesn't matter that you're prevented from doing it. This is an expectation for you to do. And if you don't do it, then you're not being faithful like you should. The third is zakat, and that is charitable giving. And this charitable giving is, and there are examples and instruction for them to care for those that are in need and to care for orphans and to offer and giving up some of your funds. Now, interestingly enough, some of the percentages of the zakat are, I was expecting to see a number similar to something that we see in the Old Testament or something along those lines of 10%. And the number, in fact, was much, much lower than that. It was actually down like 2%. I was seeing where some of them were at. Now, I don't know for sure. I can't speak as an authority on this, but I found it in a couple different places, and it startled me somewhat. But nonetheless, that's a requirement. The fourth one is one that you may have heard or seen or talked about, and that's Ramadan. And Ramadan is a time period of fasting where they would not eat while the sun is up. So from sunrise to sunset, there we're looking at it, that's it. Okay, all right, so no, I'm early. No, go back up. We're not there yet. Go back. Here, I'll do it now. Okay. All right, here we go. All right, so we've got zakat, which is charitable giving. We've got the fasting during Ramadan, and the last is the Hajj. And the Hajj is where you have to go and make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, I don't know about you, but it's a little expensive, depending on where you live, to go and travel all the way to Mecca and then go and do the Hajj. And part of it is this big spiraling walk that works all the way down to the center of Mecca. And there were a bunch of people that died, but those that die on this journey have a special reward, as well as those who, there's an emphasis on those who die as martyrs for the faith. And they have, some of the rewards, I'm telling you, they just keep adding up on these rewards depending on how you die and why you die. If you are in jihad and you are in the front lines and you die without turning your back and running afraid, and there are some rewards in here that are very physical and hedonistic is how I'll describe them. So one of the things that's interesting to me is about the uncertainty of salvation inside of Islam. Is that here is a quotation from Quran 7 verses 8 and 9. And weighing on that day, the day of resurrection, there will be a true weighing. So as for those whose scale of good deeds will be heavy, they will be successful entering into paradise. But for those whose weights are light, they will be ones who lost their souls as a consequence of disregarding our revelations unjustly. So there is a weighing. It's a scale and a balance. Can you imagine how good you would have to be in order to earn salvation? And so here, that is the prime tenet on how you are measured to get into Jannah in Islam. It is a scale. How many good deeds did you do? How many prayers did you say? How much did you give? How many hajj did you take? And did you merit? Did you deserve? Did you earn and reward Jannah or paradise? And if you didn't do enough, and if you were hindered from doing some of those pillars and you didn't those things, then what's going to happen is your destiny is hell. Now, I'm not going to spend any time on the Islamic version of hell, which is really a medieval torture scene is what it is, that is very detailed in very specific torturous activities upon the person who is in hell. But I'm going to, in this picture here is kind of an example of some of descriptions of what Jannah looks like. And it's and here's a quotation of a description of Jannah. And we're going to read several of them. And I want to go through, we're going to read probably more Quran than you've ever read in your life. But I want us to make sure that we see what it's saying. And give glad tidings to those who believe and do righteous good deeds, that for them will be gardens under which rivers flow in paradise. Every time they will be provided with a fruit therefrom, they will say, well, this is what we were provided with before. And they will be given things in resemblance, the same form, but they're going to taste different. And that taste different is going to be way better. This is the best tasting you have ever tasted of this thing that you're having, basically. And they shall have therein purified mates. These purified mates are huris. And these are almost an angelic type woman. She's this purified mate, having no menses, stools, urine. So this is another odd thing that's going on in heaven. Since it's a very physical space, they remove all the unpleasantries of the physical life. And so you can eat all that you want. And the only way that you eliminate yourself is simply by the sweat that comes out of your skin and your belching. And so strange things that are made because these other things are unclean or unpleasant to deal with. And so they're going to abide forever. In Quran 22:23, truly Allah will admit those who believe in the oneness of Allah, Islamic monotheism. This is out of a translation. One other comment is, if someone were if someone was a Muslim and they were hearing this, this is the meaning of what those words of the Quran are, but they only view the Quran as the word of Allah if it's spoken in Arabic. So by us saying it in English here, this is not actually the words of Allah, but they're merely kind of a representation of what those are, just kind of as an aside. And so truly Allah will admit those who believe in the oneness, do righteous good deeds, to the gardens underneath which river flows, and they will be adorned with bracelets of gold and pearls, and garments therein will be of silk. So now, not only are you hanging out in this garden, but this garden that you're hanging out in, you're going to be dressed in gold and pearls and fine silk. And again, in Quran 44, starting in verse 51, you see here they are on the gardens and the springs. And you're going to be dressed in silk and thick silk, and you're going to be facing one another. And you're going to be joined with fair women with beautiful, big, and lustrous eyes and dark eyes. And they will be offered all kinds of fruits. And you're going to be in a place of peace and security, that walled garden of paradise, Jannah. And in 47:15, this description, now there are 4 rivers that are inside of Jannah, interestingly enough. And I want you to think, as we're painting this picture, this is very much a physical realm. The whole description of everything that's going on is everything about this is a physical reward. And so I'm going to be living in this garden. Now, I want you to picture yourself. Here you are living on the Arabian Peninsula, and you're out in the middle of this desert area, or you're some Bedouin or something along those lines, and you have Muhammad telling you about this ideal place. Well, the very ideal place is these gardens that these Persian royalties and rulers would have. These gardens that would be very much this kind of design. This is a Persian garden design. And so when we read what Muhammad's saying that your reward will be if you are if you are faithful to Allah, is you're going to get one of those gardens, but not just one. No, you'll get two. In fact, not only you'll get two and another two. You'll have four. So this guy over here, this royalty who has this, and he's got this great walled garden with a fountain or oasis in there, and he's got some fruit trees, one of many fruit trees. No, not you. You're going to be where you've got 2 or 4 of these. And in your Jannah, you're going to have rivers of water in which the taste and smell are not changed. So this clean, pure water that never goes salty or bitter. Rivers of milk in which the taste never changes. So this just milk flowing that you can just dip down and drink this milk that never sours. Rivers of wine, delicious to those who drink. So it depends on which river you want to dip your cup in. Or rivers of clarified honey, clear and pure. And in every one of them, every kind of fruit, and forgiveness from their Lord, like those who dwell forever in the fire and be given to drink boiling water so that it cuts up their bowels. Now that's part of that verse. You can see there's a little hint of what hell looks like in Islam. But you, the reward you get, you're in this great garden that is put out there. And this great garden is like the gardens that we read about in history from Persia, where Nebuchadnezzar had the great hanging gardens in Babylon. And there he is in 600 BC laying that out. That's one of the 7 wonders of the world. And you have these gardens would have been the most luxurious and rewarding places reserved only for the wealthiest of royalty. And here, this is where you're going to be able to stay. And it's all focused, as you can see, and it's going to get more hedonistic as we go, but it's more and more on the physical pleasures of a 7th century luxury. This is the best that 7th century luxury had to offer, we're going to see here. And these walled gardens. And you're going to live in a life of luxury, and you're going to be in perpetual youth. You're going to be, no matter how old you are when you die, when you come back, you're going to be, some of the hadiths say you'll be 31 years old. I'm not sure where exactly, but you will be perpetually young. And there you are in this life of luxury with physical and material satisfaction as your reward. And so we're going to see, continuing on, these are the things that are existing there inside. Second, verily the pious will be in the gardens. They will be enjoying in that the Lord has bestowed upon them. So here, because you are pious, because you're holy, you've earned this, you're going to enjoy everything that the Lord's given you, and you are going to eat and drink happily in return for your works. And you're going to recline with ease on thrones arranged in various ranks, and you're going to be married to huris, and these huris, these heavenly type virgin women that are going to be so fair that the marrow of their bones glow through their skin, as the description is. I mean, some of the things here. And those who believe and follow, so your children, if they're faithful, they will be with you. And we shall not decrease the reward of their deeds in everything. Every person is a pledge for that which he has earned. In Quran 52, we shall bestow on them of fruit and meat and anything that they desire. So here's the picture again. You're living in this garden. You have any fruit you want. You have any meat you want. It is the best that the 7th century could offer. You've got it. And they shall pass from hand to hand a wine cup, free from, can't pronounce the word, which means dirty, false, evil, vague talk between them, and free from sin, because it will be legal for them to drink. And there will go around them boy servants of theirs and serve them as if they were preserved pearls. So you're going to live in this garden, and you're going to have these boys that are going to be perpetually, these young boys who are going to come and serve and bring you food and be your servants, your slaves in Jannah. And you're going to be able to eat anything you want and drink all of the wine from that river that you want to drink. Quran 55 here, so if you believe that Allah is the one true God and that Muhammad is his messenger, and you have kept from all kinds of sins and evil deeds, then there will be 2 gardens that will be given. And then in chapter 55, it's very interesting because it repeats this every other verse, this phrase. And so I cut the verse out, but we'll just read it once. And it says, then which of the blessings of your Lord will you both, jinns and men, deny? Interestingly enough, I had no idea what a jinn was, and so I started looking up, and that is where we get genie. And so you have kind of that mythological, angelic, demon kind of guy that is a genie that lives in a bottle or some sort of thing like that, and he's got power. Well, that's where this actually is being a reference from as well. So whether genies or jinns and men, so here's what your heaven's going to look like. Varieties of trees in which there are two, in both of these gardens, there are two fountains flowing, and both of them are two pairs of every fruit. You want one of every tree? Oh no, you get two of every tree. You want one of a garden? No, you get two gardens. You get two fountains, and more for you. And wait, there's more. And so this picture just keeps going. You're going to recline upon couches or thrones, depending on the translation, lined with silk brocade in the garden, and the fruits of these two gardens will be near at hand. You don't even have to work for them. But you also have these young men that will come and bring them to you. And there will be beautiful maidens, untouched by mankind or genie before, who are as beautiful as rubies and pearls. Is there any reward for good other than good? Look what the view of good is. This material, physical blessing. This is the focus of the Islamic view of heaven. And besides these two, there were two other gardens. Now we're up to 4. Dark green in color because they've been watered a lot. I mean, you're living on the Arabian Peninsula. It's kind of dry there. And so they're all watered up. And so these two springs gushing in water, there's all kinds of fruits and dates and pomegranates, and the maidens are going to be there with lovely black eyes, and no one's going to be able to touch them, and they're going to be laying on green cushions and beautiful mattresses. Which of these things are you going to deny? And so you get to the description of the judgment. There are 3 groups in judgment. We would look at the biblical view. There are 2 on the right and the left. There are 3 in Islam. The 3 are, you have those folks that are on the right hand. Those are the faithful. You have those that are on the left. Those are going to be thrown away. Then you have those that are in the foremost. These are the folks that are going to be front of the line. And there's all sorts of stuff. They're going to be seated on these couches and thrones, lots of gold and jewels. They're going to be served all sorts of food. This is interesting. They'll be served by immortal boys, never altering in age, with cups and jugs and a glass from the flowing wine, where there is no headache. You don't have to, there's going to be no hangovers in heaven. That would really be a drag. And so there's going to be no headaches or hangovers or intoxication or madness or illness. Serve the fruits of your choice and the flesh of the fowls that you desire. You're going to have these houris with beautiful, lustrous eyes and protected pearls, and as a reward for the deeds that you've done. And with these women that are going to be around, depending on how many you have, you're going to hear no unnecessary or sinful talk. You can think about the picture that's being painted here. Like, you don't have to worry about all these women. There'll be no unnecessary talk from them. They're only going to be... And now if you're on the right-hand side, then you have a little bit different kind of look. You're going to it'll be thornless trees and bananas and plantains and water, and you're still on couches, and you have these maidens that are the same age, and you're going to, and these silk garments and the thrones, and you're not going to have to worry about the excessive heat because it's going to be very shady, and there's going to be fruit really close to your reach, and you're going to be able to drink out of vessels that are crystal and silver, and basically you can determine the measure of according to your wishes, and you're going to be given a drink there of a cup of wine mixed with ginger, and life there is just a constant reward. And I had to filter this one out of the Quran. I had to change a little bit what was being said, and so you'll have to give me. But you deserve, it says, the righteous have deserved a reward and will be fulfillment of their heart's desires with gardens and orchards and vineyards. And young women, voluptuous women was the softest description that I could find in there. It was a little more detailed. And you're not going to hear any necessary vain words or lies as a reward for or a payment for your deeds. Do you see what's going on? So here, if I refrain from all these impure and evil desires and lusts, then this garden where I can engage in all those very same things, that's going to be mine for all eternity. In Quran 41, here's what's interesting. It talks about, then who say the Lord is Allah alone and leads a righteous life, the angels will descend on him. And you have the good news of the garden. And we've been your friends. Therefore you shall have all that your inner selves desire. And therein you shall have all for that which you ask for. An entertainment or welcome gift from Allah, the oft-forgiving, most merciful. You have anything your inner desire. You want to have heaven? Like if I'm going to convince you to go die in the field of battle, the example that I'm giving you everything your heart desires. And the picture I paint is that of this garden, of luxurious rivers of milk and wine and honey, and you're dressed in these fine garments, and anything you want to eat, and sensual pleasures with multiple houris, whatever you desire, whatever you ask for. And when you look at the comparison there, this physical, sensual pleasures are dominating Jannah, whereas we look forward to a spiritual fellowship with God in heaven. There, it's an earned salvation. How does the scale weigh out? But we are saved by grace through faith. I'm thankful that I'm not saved based on how good I am, because I would have lost out long ago. God in Jannah is transcendent, distant even. You're not there. But I get to be in heaven for all eternity with our Father in heaven. Amen. It's not some 7th century version of whatever their ideal garden is. No, I get to dwell with God in His presence. And so my last point for this lesson is we got to be careful not to be guilty of the thing that Muhammad was guilty of. And that's turning heaven into something that it's not. We sometimes will sing a song, and for the sake of time, since Brian's up here, we won't read it, but we sometimes will sing the song, Mansions Over the Hilltop. Man, I'm satisfied with just a little silver and gold below, but wait till I get there. I'm going to be in my own mansion, streets of gold. Give it to me, here we come. Heaven is not about some material wealth that I'm going to get living in a mansion. No, there'll be plenty of room for me with all of God's believers and with Him. But I'll finish with this one thing. Besides that, we must not try to push materialistic views into heaven, and we must not make heaven into some sort of physical Shangri-La, Jannah version of heaven. No, that's not what it is. But I find it interesting that, believe it or not, there is a description in the Bible that matches very, very closely to that of Jannah that I just read. Did you know that? In the Bible, there is a description of almost the same thing that Jannah is there. Do you know where that's at? And it's not in the Garden of Eden. Open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and the lesson will be yours. Here we have, in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, we have Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest man that had ever lived. And here he is, and at the very beginning, he's starting out, and what he says is, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. How much pleasure can I possibly engage in, Solomon says. But behold, this was also vanity. I said, of laughter it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, how to satisfy my flesh with as much wine as I can. My heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly. How could I do all these things? Till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. How can I live my life up while I'm here? I mean, this guy, he's living. He's got all the means and money to do what he would want to do. So what did he do? Solomon says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. And I made for myself gardens and parks. Yours may say something else, but that word parks there is the exact same word for paradiso. The very same word. So he's making these walled gardens, and he plants in them all kinds of fruit. Sound familiar? And I made for myself pools of water for the forest to be growing. Sound familiar? And I bought male and female servants and had slaves that were born in my house. Sound familiar? And I had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than anyone who had come before me in Jerusalem. And I gathered for myself silver and gold and treasure of kings and provinces. And I had singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of men. I'm telling you, Solomon lived Jannah before Jannah was ever thought of. And do you know what he says at the very end? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. You know what the whole of man is? fear God, and keep His commandments. Thank you.